On September 13th, 1944, the USS Warrington, a Summers-class destroyer, was hit by the Great Atlantic Hurricane off the Bahamas. Despite the exhaustive efforts of the crew to salvage the situation, the destroyer eventually sank, leaving only 73 out of the 321 crew members alive. This is one of the few occasions when massive waves have caused heavy damage or total destruction to the elite U.S. destroyer ships. Although the technologically advanced vessels are adequately equipped to battle any foe or adversary on the high seas, guns and munitions prove ineffective in the war against the elements. When the sea unleashes its fury, how does the destroyer fare against the tides? How does this gigantic floating arsenal navigate through rough seas and terrifying ocean waves? And what fate befalls the crew as they battle the natural forces that attempt to sink them to the bottom of the ocean? Evolution of the destroyer. The development of the destroyer began in the 1860s, following the emergence of self-propelled torpedoes, which gave the Navy the ability to destroy enemy battle fleets without breaking a sweat. Soon, a class of cheap, fast vessels known as torpedo boats became a menace on the ocean, as they were capable of destroying large capital ships near the enemy coast. The first maritime vessel designed to launch the self-propelled Whitehead torpedo was the HMS Lightning, which was unleashed in 1876. By the 1880s, many navies around the world boasted of faster and longer-range torpedo boats, making them one of the most ruthless vessels in any naval arsenal. To combat the growing threat of these torpedo boats, Navy Captain Fernando Villamil of the Spanish Navy conceived the idea of a counter-vessel in 1885. This new class of ships would be capable of taking out both the torpedoes and the boats that launched them. Thus, the destroyer class was born. By the time the Russo-Japanese War began in 1904, these torpedo boat destroyers, or TBDs, had become a crucial part of any Navy fleet. These ships were basically large, swift, and powerfully armed torpedo boats designed to destroy other torpedo boats. TBDs were so effective on the battlefield that they earned a reputation for being the thorn in the flesh of some of the world's most advanced military forces at the time. The United States Navy began acquiring these highly effective torpedo boat destroyers in 1898, while the Spanish-American War raged on in the Caribbean and the Pacific. The then Assistant Secretary of the Navy Theodore Roosevelt saw the grave threat these destroyers posed to the American Navy and subsequently pushed for the acquisition of similar vessels. As they say, if you can't beat them, join them. On May 4, 1948, the U.S. Congress approved the first 16 TBDs, along with 12 torpedo boats to further enhance the capabilities of the United States Navy. But it wasn't until World War I came knocking that the United States Navy started mass-producing our own version of the destroyers, beginning with the laying of 273 keels of the Clemson and Wickes-class destroyers. Today, destroyers perform multifaceted roles, ranging from escorting larger vessels like the aircraft carriers to protecting convoys bearing precious cargo. These massive ships are equipped with advanced weaponry capable of taking out any enemy target, playing both the offensive and defensive roles. Anatomy of a destroyer. Like a bodyguard watching over the most precious American assets, the U.S. Navy destroyers stand between America and its enemies. Today, the U.S. Navy boasts several guided missile destroyers, or DDGs, in their fleet, the most notable being the Arleigh Burke class, designated as DDG-51, and the next-generation Zumwalt class. The Arleigh Burke class was designed to replace the Charles F. Adams and Farragut class, and it features some of the most technologically advanced modern destroyers in the world. Just like the much larger Ticonderoga-class cruisers, the Arleigh Burke class's combat capabilities centers around the Aegis Weapon System, or AWS. This revolutionary weapon system is composed of the SPI-1D multi-function phased array radar, advanced AAW and ASW systems, VLS, and the Tomahawk weapon system. With these advancements, the Arleigh Burke class continues its revolution at sea, unshaken by any form of threat or intimidation. The ships in the class employ an all-steel construction, which ensures durability, stability, and strength. This elite class of DDGs is currently composed of 62 ships, with an additional 13 more under contract. Like most U.S. surface combatants, the DDG-51 utilized gas turbine propulsion, which employed the use of 4 General Electric LM2500 gas turbines to produce 100,000 total shaft horsepower via a dual shaft design. When it comes to speed, though, the Arleigh Burke class is a beast on the ocean, capable of traveling at over 30 knots. The Zumwalt class, on the other hand, is the lead ship of the next-generation multi-mission destroyers, designated as DDG-1000. This next-level fighting machine is tailored for land attacks and littoral dominance, with capabilities that defeat both the threats of today and those that will surface in the coming decades. The DDG-1000 is the first U.S. Navy surface combatant that will employ an innovative and highly survivable integrated power system, or IPS, a revolutionary technology that will change the game forever. This wave-piercing, tumblesome ship design features a composite superstructure, which significantly reduces cross-section and acoustic output, making the ship harder to detect by the enemies while at sea. But beyond the hardware, big guns, and high tech, these U.S. Navy destroyers depend heavily on the capable hands of the personnel of the Navy men and women who risk their lives every day to defend the territories and assets of the United States. So, what's life like for these individuals, and how do they survive the rigors of managing these titans of the open sea? The men behind the machine. How many people does it take to operate and manage a U.S. Navy destroyer? Typically, 200 to 300. Think of it as a small town or a heavy industry with different departments, run by a team of highly trained and highly dedicated professionals, who sometimes have to perform multifaceted functions. Although there are slight variations between different ships, the organizational structure of a U.S. Navy destroyer looks something like this. First, you've got the operations department, a dedicated team of specialists who are responsible for operating the ship. The department is divided into 2 divisions. The deck division, tasked with managing the watches, lines, refueling stations, and other related functions, and the operations division, which handles the combat systems and intelligence. Then there's the engineering department, which performs a wide variety of functions. Although everyone on the ship plays a role in the day-to-day activities of the destroyer, especially in tense situations, the engineers aboard are some of the most indispensable, because without them, the ship wouldn't be able to function properly. The engineering department is divided into various divisions, which operate the engines, maintain the generators, and supervise the maintenance of damage control equipment. With assistance from other departments, personnel on the engineering team make up the damage control unit, which ensures that, on the occasion that the ship encounters a precarious situation, whether from an enemy vessel or the forces of nature, the ship is well maintained and prevented from suffering any major damage. These engineers work round the clock to ensure that none of the systems are compromised, guaranteeing the safety of both the vessel and the crew aboard. The Combat Systems Department is also one of the most vital units on a U.S. Navy destroyer, and is composed of 2 major divisions. First, there's the Gunnery Division, which is responsible for the maintenance and operation of the missile system, as well as the gun system. In the case of an attack, the Gunnery Division ensures that the vessel's offensive and defensive systems perform optimally, enabling the destroyer to take out the targets without breaking a sweat. Then, of course, there's the Fire Control Division, which is further divided into Gunfire Control and CIWs, and the Missile Fire Control Division. The personnel of the Gunfire Control Division are responsible for maintaining and operating the equipment that points the gun, while the CIWS Division takes care of and operates the close-in weapon system. The Missile Fire Control Division, on the other hand, is tasked with maintaining and operating the equipment that tracks air and surface targets, the computers and information display systems, and the missile guidance radars. Then, there's also the Supply Department, which performs a long list of functions, including operating the ship's store, where the trademarked materials, ball caps, Liberty jackets, candy, and so on are stored and sold. The department also handles the ship's dining facilities, including the crew mess, the chief's mess, and the wardroom. There's also a barber's shop, because our brave sailors need to look clean and neat while fighting off the enemies and terrible ocean waves, and a laundry for taking care of the crew's needs. Life on a U.S. Navy destroyer. For the men and women aboard the U.S. Navy destroyers, life on such a massive vessel cruising through the unpredictable waters can be quite tricky. First, there is the case of seasickness, which plagues even the most seasoned sailors. From the moment the vessel pulls out of the harbor, it will remain in a constant state of motion, pitching, rolling, yawing, and sometimes turning violently. In some extreme weather conditions, the entire bow of a ship can disappear underwater, and even rolls side to side of up to 45 degrees are not unheard of. With these conditions, it is practically impossible not to get sick. There are cases when the seas get so rough that it can be too dangerous to cook, leaving the crew with cold-cut sandwiches for breakfast, lunch, and dinner. However, most of the crew eventually develop sea legs after their bodies become accustomed to the ship's constant motion. But just when the crew seem to find their rhythm and are able to keep their breakfast in their stomach, the vessel will most likely hit a storm. This is where things get tricky. With rough waters rocking the ship violently, even the crustiest sailors find themselves clutching their stomachs, bringing back the queasiness that marked their first days in the ocean. Coupled with the intensely frightening situation, it's safe to say that the nerve-wracking experience may eventually end in an involuntary visit to the restroom. Beyond the seasickness, though, crew members aboard the U.S. Navy destroyers also have to make do with as little sleep as possible. According to studies, workers need at least 7 hours of sleep per day to function optimally. However, only about a third of sailors aboard a destroyer have work schedules that allow for that amount of rest. Most crew members have to endure a full workday of 8 hours, which can even be longer in dangerous situations, such as terrible weather conditions and combat situations. After going through intense stress throughout the day, some crew members are still required to stand some sort of watch for some hours of the night. This may include staring through a pair of binoculars, a radar scope, or instrument gauges. These night duties may also involve steering the ship or plotting navigation, depending on the specific department. Occasionally, everyone has to stand after hours watching, some more than the others. Then, of course, there are the special evolutions, like refueling from a tanker ship at sea, getting supplies from a helicopter, drills, exercises, and on the occasion that the crew have to battle a massive storm, no one sleeps through the night. With this busy work schedule, most sailors have to make do with just 4 hours of sleep, or even fewer on some occasions. However, after spending extended periods on these behemoths of the ocean, everyone eventually gets into the rhythm of things and adapts to the rigors of daily living. No privacy. If you've seen military movies, there's a high chance you have a deeply seated misconception about the living quarters on Navy vessels. Although on-screen depictions often portray the accommodation available for the personnel aboard a Navy ship as optimal and spacious, this is far from the truth. The reason behind this is that luxury and comfort aren't exactly the major priorities in the design of these destroyers. Most of the crew aboard these vessels sleep in a section of the ship known as the berthing area. Think of it as one big bunk room, packed with 40 to 50 snoring, sleep-talking, hygiene-challenged crewmates. On these ships, privacy is a myth. The berthing area is also situated near a fuel tank, an ammunition magazine, the ocean, or all three, so sleeping blissfully is a dream that's probably never going to become reality. While most prisoners are entitled to have up to 25 square feet of space, crew members aboard the destroyers have to make do with less. The berthing areas, which offer insufficient space for the bunk beds, are also jam-packed even further with rows of minuscule lockers to pack uniforms and whatever personal items belong to the crew members. In terrifying situations, such as when battling a storm, the internal compartments of the ship are usually filled with a sea of people, each scrambling to get to their station, perform their functions, and ensure that the ship makes it out in one piece. On the occasion that the ship encounters troubled water, all hands are required to be on deck to ensure that the ship doesn't end up at the bottom of the ocean. From the captain to the lowest seaman, everyone scrambles to wherever help is needed, lending their expertise, muscle, and strength to steer the ship out of the danger zones and into the clear waters. These troubled times can range from a few hours of intense struggle to days of sleepless battles against the elements. Nature in itself is an unrelenting warrior, and sometimes it unleashes its fury unprovoked. In order to minimize the damage to the ship and prevent any form of catastrophe, crew members must always be alert and expect that danger can arise without any warning. One moment, the ocean can appear calm and smooth as glass, and within just a few minutes, everything can totally turn upside down, putting both vessel and personnel at the risk of drowning. Even more frightening is the ever-present possibility of a fire erupting aboard the ship while it is being rocked by heavy waves. In this case, the issues become multifaceted, and while many battle to keep the systems alive in the storm, others have to become temporary firefighters, quenching trouble wherever it arises, before it becomes a monster that swallows everything whole. Preparing for the worst. Before ever setting sail, the crew of a U.S. Navy destroyer undergo months of intense training, preparing them for the worst that could happen in the open ocean, where help is usually millions of miles away. This is especially crucial for DDGs, which partake in solo missions, where other U.S. vessels can be way out of reach, and things would have taken a horrific turn before help arrives. While aboard the ship, crew members are subjected to several constant drills, which are tailored to real-life situations and prepare them for some of the hazards that can spell doom for the ship and its crew. Some of the standard drills required for a ship of such size and functionality include the engine room flooding drill, the enclosed space drill, the crankcase explosion drill, the oil spill drill, the bunker training, and the blackout training, to mention a few. The engine room flooding drill prepares the crew to respond promptly to leakages that may lead to flooding in the engine room. If not quickly and properly managed, engine room flooding can lead to extreme damage or complete loss of some of the most important machinery on the ship, such as the generators, main engine, and so on. Once these crucial parts stop working, the vessel tethers precariously on the edge of danger, leading to a complete blackout that may result in the worst outcome possible. Flooding training drills the crew members on the proper action required in these emergency situations, like grounding and collision, which may cause serious structural damage and flooding in the engine room. On the other hand, the enclosed space drill educated the crew on the proper protocol required when accessing several ranks and confined spaces. The engine room aboard these U.S. Navy destroyers comprises these specially designed spaces, which require special expertise to access, or else considerable damage may be dealt to the ship. Crankcase explosion in the engine can lead to heavy loss on the vessel's property and even some fatal situations. However, with proper drills and training, the crew will be well prepared to take the necessary actions when the engine's oil mist detector gives an alarm. Then there's the oil spill drill, which prepares the crew for occasions when the oil carried on the ship for use in the machinery leaks out of the proper storage or usage area due to the troubles on the rough sea. In order to minimize the damage caused by these oil spills, proper training is provided for the crew, educating them on how to handle such a situation. Finally, on the rare occasion that the rough water batters the vessel so much that it loses its power source totally, the blackout training helps prepare the crew to handle the situation appropriately. This is probably the most important drill required for emergencies, as it can determine whether the vessel and her crew make it out of these precarious situations in one piece. Blackout conditions lead to a dead ship, whose fate is dependent on the sea and wind. However, with proper training, the crew should be able to bring the ship back to life and continue sailing on its determined course.